if I asked it out loud, but I remember wondering like, hey, why are they sending me? And
Right.
so remember it was like 2 a.m. or between 12 and 2. I was sitting in this room just waiting to get on a plane. I was gonna get on this plane by myself. It was C-130. So here I am getting on this huge C-130 just by myself, the only dude on the
Wow.
plane, in the middle of the night. Because special operations, you only operate in the middle of the night.
Right.
I remember seeing my backpack, and I remember I was like literally scared, man. I took a picture of my backpack, and I told two of my buddies, I said, hey, listen, man, I said I don't know if I'm overreacting, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm going into a sticky situation. Um, and if for some reason something happens, I want you guys to do my funeral. I said,
Hmm.
not trying to be over dramatic, but this is kind of where we are right now. And kind of what led me to believe that was the fact that, well, one is our building did get hit and we had some people that were injured in that attack. The fact that they weren't willing to send any other members to Iraq with me, it told me about the nature of the situation. I was like,
Welcome to Faith in the Line of Duty, a podcast where real people in uniform share how their faith in Christ has carried them through the toughest moments. I'm Daniel Johnson, husband, father, and currently active duty in the United States Air Force. Each episode, I sit down with military members and first responders to talk about the power of the gospel, the strength of community, and how faith transforms lives, even in the line of duty.
The views expressed in this podcast are those of the host and do not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, or the U.S. government. Now here's your host, Daniel Johnson.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Faith in the Line of Duty. Today I have the honor of introducing Chaplain Guerrero. He was my chaplain when I was stationed in Turkey, so we're just really excited to have you on today.
appreciate it, man. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we'll just get started. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Where do I begin, man? I mean, yeah. I was born in Guam. I lived there for the first 10 years of my life. My dad was a product of how do I say this? He was also a military brat, so to speak. His dad was in the U.S. Navy, and so when he was a kid, he would travel back and forth between Guam and the Philippines. That's where my family's originally from, is the Philippines. So my dad grew up on the island of Guam because that's where his dad was stationed at, and his dad ended up retiring there. Um, and then he met my mom in the Philippines while he was on vacation or on leave, so to speak. And they ended up getting married, and so he brought her to Guam. And then a few years later, my sister was born, and I was born. And so I lived there up until I was 11. No, really, yeah, around 10 or 11. And so I left the island in 1991, and then I moved to Colorado Springs to live with an uncle and aunt for about a year and a half to 2 years before I eventually went to Georgia to kind of start over.
What do you miss most about Guam?
I don't know, man. I left when I was 10 or 11, so I have a hard time kind of trying to remember what it was all about. I remember it was an island. I remember going to the beach every now and then. My dad had a jet ski business, so that's kind of what I helped my dad with every now and then. He would pick up tourists, primarily Japanese tourists, and he would allow me to teach him how to ride a jet ski. And we had a coconut tree in our front yard, so it was a beautiful island from what I can remember. But as a kid, I always remember wanting to go to the mainland. That was kind of a big thing, is like trying to get off the island if you can. So,
And how were you able to do that?
I mean, it happened through unfortunate circumstances. So now I know that I gave you kind of a write up of my story, and so I remember at the age of 10, having to leave the island pretty abruptly. My dad, as I stated, was involved with drugs, and I don't really know the extent of that. I know he used drugs, but I think he was also involved with selling and trafficking drugs, and I don't even know the type of drugs he was selling or trafficking. But there was a huge drug bust in 1991, and my dad was caught up in that, and so he ended up having to flee the island, and he basically just left us and went to the Philippines because the U.S. they couldn't catch him there because he had friends and that kind of thing. And so I remember him just saying, "Hey, listen, like you guys will probably never see me again on U.S. soil unless you guys decide to come to the Philippines." And so I remember my mom just saying, "Hey, we have to make it to the Philippines to see your dad." And it was very abrupt. It was like you can't tell any of your friends we're leaving. We've got to go. And so all I remember is like within a few days we were packing up all our stuff, and obviously we couldn't bring everything, and we were leaving our house. And next, we were on Philippine soil, and so when we reunited with my dad, it was kind of a scary time because he was hiding. It was an interesting dynamic to kind of watch. He was, we're driving around the Philippines with his head kind of ducked in a car because he didn't want to be seen. And he had all his friends with him, and they all had guns, and it was just kind of scary. And at the same time, his two brothers were Air Force officers, and they were stationed at Clark Air Base, and one was stationed at Subic Air Base or Naval Base. And there were two older brothers, and they saw kind of what was going on. And one of his brothers said, "Hey, listen, like you're pretty much told my dad, hey, you're kind of being a dumbass. Like you're in trouble, and you're taking your family along with this ride." And he and his wife, they had two kids of their own, younger kids. One was my age, the other one was like 3 at the time. And he said, your kids don't need to be living like this and following you around. They need a better education." And so they offered to take us to Colorado Springs. They're getting ready to PCS to Colorado Springs, Peterson Air Force Base. And so um, my mom and dad, they're like, "Yeah, I mean, we're not in a good situation right now. We're kind of running." And they pulled us out in the middle of the school year. And so they said, "Yeah, let him, take him, take care of him, whatever documents you need, take him with you." And so that's eventually how we made it to the States. Um,
Wow. And how did you deal with that as a kid? I mean, that had to be really tough.
I mean, at some level, there's a level of excitement because as a kid growing up on a small island, all you ever want to do is get off the island and do something different. And so there's a level of excitement of like, oh, okay, this is what we get to do. But at the age of 10, I don't know if you really comprehend all that's going on.
Right.
Um, I remember kind of being scary at some point because when my dad dropped us off at the airport, he couldn't go in the airport because again, he was afraid to get arrested. And so I remember them dropping us off, and again, he had friends, had guns, and they dropped us off outside, and we basically had to say our goodbyes out there. And even then, he was kind of like, you can tell he was like looking around because he was afraid he might get arrested.
Hmm.
And he was just dropping off me and my sister, and my mom was going to stay with him. And that was hard because I didn't know what we were walking into. And then I was with my uncle and aunt, their two kids, so there was a level of, as a kid, you're also kind of excited about, what you're going to do,
Yeah.
moving to a new location. But, shortly after that, as soon as we got to Colorado Springs, once it kind of set in, it was tough, because I never knew if I'd see my parents again. And so I remember at night crying and just sobbing and
Hmm.
just missing my parents, and not knowing if I'm ever going to see my dad again because would he survive? Will he get killed? I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And so, yeah, there were some rough moments along the way.
Wow. And then, so when you lived in Colorado, was it a little bit difficult adjusting there?
Yeah, I mean, you went from the tropical island of Guam all the way to the Rocky Mountains. And I think when we moved there, it was in the middle of the winter PCS, so there was snow. I remember getting to Colorado Springs real late at night, probably early morning, and there was snow on the ground. And I'd never seen snow at that point.
Oh,
So
wow.
there was that adjustment, but there also the adjustment of I grew up on an island, so I didn't need winter clothes, And so here's my uncle and aunt bringing us to a new place, a state, and all of a sudden we're like, "Hey, we need to get you some clothes." But they didn't necessarily. I don't know how well they thought out. Like, "Hey, we got to buy these kids all new wardrobes." So a lot of my clothes were like hand me downs from different uncles who visited the states or aunts who'd visited the states, and so I remember that being an adjustment, growing up, being a kid that had parents that were pretty well off because my dad did pretty well for himself. So obviously he was selling drugs, so he was doing something, um, and making some money. But to go from being pretty wealthy to all of a sudden living with an uncle and aunt who are basically just giving you scraps. I mean, they loved us and they cared for us, but they just had other priorities, and buying us a completely new wardrobe really wasn't their priority. Uh, they were going to get us what we needed, but it wasn't going to be fancy or anything like that. So as a kid having to deal with that, I remember that kind of being a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. So how long did you live there in Colorado?
So we lived with them for about a year and a half to 2 years. I forget exactly. And eventually my mom made it to Colorado. Um, and, uh, and she lived with us for about 6 months until, she realized like, hey, like we need to get out of here. Living with basically her brother-in-law and his wife, it just wasn't a good environment for her. And so she had a best friend that lived in Georgia, and her husband was a retired Air Force. I think he was a senior enlisted guy, and he was a retired Air Force. And so they offered us a place to stay, and they said you can stay here for as long as you need to until you get on your feet, and then just start over. And so as soon as my mom was able to save enough money, because we got on welfare while we were in Colorado, as soon as she was able to save that money, we bought plane tickets and moved to Georgia and started from there.
And what was that like being reunited with your mom?
Oh man, it was awesome. Again, as a kid, you're still trying to adapt to a new school, a new life. But yeah, it was good to finally see my mom. And then, it wasn't a good situation for all of us to be live with my uncle and aunt. And so she was like, "Hey, let's get out of here. This is not good." Not They were great people, but you can tell that we were a burden to them, and they wanted to have their own family, and so there was obviously those kind of feelings of knowing that we were a burden to them, and they didn't really sign up to take care of a total of 4 kids because it was me and my sister. Then on top of that, my mom, and so we just had to get out of there, and so that's what my mom did.
Gotcha. So were you there in Georgia up until you graduated high school?
Yeah, so Valdosta, Georgia, which is South Georgia in particular, where it's near Moody Air Force Base. And so I was there up until 2003. So I
Oh, okay.
finished college there as well. So I went through middle school, high school, and college there in Jordan.
So from that point where you graduated in 2003, what was that journey that led you to become a chaplain?
Man, it kind of started obviously it started from the womb. You know what I mean? God was working his plan whether we knew it or not. He is working his providential plan. But I came to faith in college. So I remember growing up around the Catholic Church. My parents are both nominal Catholics. Um, as a kid, my mom taught me how to say the Lord's Prayer. My dad and his family, they were deeply Catholic. Um, and when I was in college, I was dating a girl that I dated in high school, and we both kind of were introduced to, well, she was already a Christian, but wasn't really walking it out, living out her faith, and I was a big part of that. But I met a guy named Scott, and he was also from Guam, so I kind of found that interesting. So we kind of clicked, and really he just started to share his faith with me in the context of a relationship. You gotta understand, growing up in Georgia, you meet a lot of Christians. There are a lot of people that are, would identify as Christians, and they were good people. But honestly, there weren't very many men that I respected. Like these weren't Christians that I thought I wanted to be around, I wanted to hang out with. And so uh, I met Scott, and he was just a good dude that I can connect with. Well, we played a lot of sports together. We just connected on a lot of different levels. And in the context of that friendship, he just started to share his faith with me. And I remember one day, it was October 7th or 8th, 1997, freshman year in college. He just asked me straight up, "Hey, Genesis, are you Christian?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I believe in Christ, and I was raised Catholic. And he said, how do you know you're a Christian? And I said, well, I mean, I'm not sleeping with my girlfriend. I don't smoke. I don't drink. And I started listing all the things that I do or I don't do. I treat my girlfriend well, all this kind of stuff. And he just shared, he said, hey, listen, man, I mean, those are all great things, but none of those things make you a Christian. And then he quoted Ephesians 2:8-9, for it is by grace you've been saved through faith, it's not of yourself. And and I was like, okay. And he goes, understand, basically, do you understand what that means? What it's saying? I said, no. And he basically was saying, you're not saved from those things you listed, you know. Although those are good things, you're saved by what Christ has done for you on the cross. And if you believe in that, uh, and you believe in that truth, you can confess with your mouth that He's Lord, and basically, I can lead you through the sinner's prayer kind of thing. And so, obviously, the sinner's prayer doesn't save you, but that's basically what he was doing, was saying, hey, listen, if you believe that you aren't saved by your works and that Jesus is the only way to God, um, and you want to make that a reality in your life, is that something you want to do? I said, yeah, absolutely. So it wasn't this emotional decision. It was just in the context of a friendship, in the context of time, me being exposed to Christian meetings and those kind of things, going to church, that he shared the gospel with me. And from then he just said, hey, well, now that so we prayed together, but after that he goes, hey, now that you have accepted Christ, we're going to start growing in our faith. And then he invited me to just say, hey, do you want to be in a Bible study with me, just to learn more about the Bible and learn more about who Jesus is and what it means to be a disciple. And so that started out in college, and that was kind of my exposure to young adult ministry. And so all throughout college, I started growing my faith, and I really took discipleship, being a disciple, but also making disciples. I took that really seriously, and basically invested my whole college career into that. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. Is I want to, whatever I'm doing occupationally, I want to be a disciple, and I want to learn how to make disciples. And so I was really kind of geared for that mindset. Uh, and so when I graduated from college, I had an opportunity to go on staff with this college ministry that I was a part of. It's called Campus Outreach. And initially I said no, and I wanted to go into the workforce. And so that's what I did. I ended up going into the workforce for a few years, and I sold construction equipment. And then somewhere along that time frame, I think I was 24, and I was making pretty decent money at that time, because it was I was living in Jacksonville. The Super Bowl was coming to Jacksonville, so they're building up Jacksonville really well, and so business is really good for me. But I remember thinking, man, I love the money, but I'm not passionate about what I'm doing. Like, I feel like I'd rather be making disciples and sitting in front of a young man talking about Jesus more than anything, more than these business meetings that I'm going to. And so I remember just saying, you know what, I think I want to go back, and I want to do some college ministry. And so I went into college ministry. I did that for a few years, and then worked for a church, worked at a hospital as a hospital chaplain, and just investigating different types of ministry, primarily with young adults. But because I'd always been around the military, because my dad was prior Army, my grandfather's U.S. Navy, I lived with an uncle that was an Air Force officer. I lived right near Moody Air Force Base. Um, so I always kind of had this affinity, or some sort of, I was always close to the military at some level. And so I remember one day I was working at a church, and I was trying to figure out, what is my calling? Am I called to plant a church? Am I called to be a hospital chaplain? I'm not sure. What am I called to do? And so I called a military chaplain up. I was living in St. Augustine, Florida, and I said, hey, man, can you tell me a little bit about what you do? And as the guy was talking, I was like, I feel like this is very similar to what I did as a college pastor. You go build relationships, you get meetings, and depending on your faith, you learn how to share your faith in that context. And so I said, man, I think I could do this. And so I did more research. At the time, I was looking at the National Guard. But I ended I entered this program called the Chaplain Candidate Program, and it was with the Air Force, and it basically introduces you to what it looks like to become a chaplain. And so you shadow chaplains over the summers. You go to boot camp, and for us, it was Officer Development School, or I think it was OTS. I forget what it's or Commission Officer Training for the Air Force. So I went to Commission Officer Training, and it's basically the boot camp for officers with advanced degrees like doctors, lawyers, nurses, all that kind of stuff. So I went to boot camp with all those types of people. And I remember thinking, man, I really love this, dude. Like, I'm going to get paid to try to stay in shape and build relationships with people and share the gospel and share my faith. And just in the context of relationships, obviously there's a lot of red tape and there's things you can and can't do. You can't really proselytize, but that was never really my style anyway. My style has always been, hey, share it in the context of a friendship. Don't like force anything. I was never into that. I was never really into trying to build a church or numbers. I just wanted to go somewhere where I can be faithful and just serve God, doing my job kind of thing. And so once I got into the candidate program, I realized I think this is what I want to do. And so my wife and I got married in 2009. We both made the decision like, hey, this is something we want to pursue. And through my 4 years of seminary, I got married, started seminary, and at the same time I started seminary, I started the chaplain candidate program. And that was really an opportunity for us to discern, is this what we really want to do? And it was a long process. It wasn't going to happen overnight, right? So you're in the chaplain candidate program for about 3 to 4, for me it was 5 years, and you can discern every summer, like, hey, is this kind of what we want to do? And God kept on confirming, hey, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. And there were a lot of times I wanted to quit because the seminary program I went to was a 106-hour program, and it was you had to have a Master of Divinity to be an Air Force chaplain, and at least 2 years of post-seminary experience. And honestly, I had to take Greek and Hebrew at the same time. I was
Oh,
traveling 2
wow.
hours away to school, and along the way I just tell my wife my wife was like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Like, I don't need Greek and Hebrew, and I don't need a Master of Divinity. I can pastor local church. I can do something different. And she was like, no, like, I feel like this is, we can't settle. We need to pursue what God's calling us to do. And I was trying to find every way out, man. I did not want to finish that degree. You know what I mean? I was
Right.
like, I can master biblical studies. It's like a lot less hours. I don't have to have
Right.
languages. Um, and she just kept on saying, no, like, I think you're living out of fear and not faith. And she kept on challenging me along the way. But every time I'd go off to a different base for the summer, because you'd have to go to a different base 5 weeks at a time and just shadow chaplains, I just kept on thinking, man, I love this, man. Like, I'm taking out with young adults, build relationships, share the gospel with them in the context of those relationships, and nothing's forced. It's just, just naturally building relationships. Um, and so eventually, when I graduated from seminary, I was trying to become an Air Force chaplain, but the Air Force at the time, when I was in the candidate program, they were like, "Hey, listen, you can become an active duty chaplain as soon as you graduate, and you meet the maximum or the minimum 2 years of post seminary experience." And so I was like, "Well, I met the post seminary experience. I ended up becoming a chaplain at a hospital, and so I was going to go in the Air Force. I was going in the Air Force, and they're like, "Hey, listen, you have to serve at least 3 years as an active duty chaplain or a reserve chaplain." Before you can come in. And I just said, no, like, I feel like I'm ready to be active duty, not be a reservist for 3 more years. And so eventually that happened. I went active duty in 2016 as an Air Force chaplain, and then eventually in 2023 transferred to the Navy. So, kind of a long story to answer your question. How did you become a military chaplain? That's a long story, but yeah, that's how it went down.
I love that. And when you go back to it, the small decision that your friend chose to make just to disciple you and just tell you the truth and look at what has grown from it. And I think that's why it's really important just, to always take the opportunity to disciple someone, because you never know what's going to come from it.
Yeah, man, and trust me, I was not a good disciple, man. I would give him a hard time all the time. So, yeah, but
No,
he's a good guy. He's actually pastor of a church right now in Charlotte. No, not Charlotte. He's somewhere in Virginia now. But yeah, we still keep up.
that's awesome. So for you being a chaplain, you being at the hospital in the Air Force and the Navy, a lot of people bring you a lot of their grief. How do you handle all that, like all the trauma that you have to deal with? How do you handle that?
Um, Man, it depends. Kind of depends on what's brought my way, but honestly, it's challenging. Sometimes you're carrying a heavy burden, and and if people who are listening you don't know is as a chaplain, I have 100% confidentiality, and so what that means is that someone can tell me that they're suicidal. Someone can tell me that their husband or their spouse abused them, and by law, I can't report that. And so people can tell me that they're using drugs illegally or that they're cheating on their spouse. And I'm the one entity in the Department of Defense and really, Department of Homeland Security where people can tell me whatever they want to tell me, and it just stays between me and that person. And so I'm not a mandatory reporter. And so, yeah, I do have to carry some of those burdens. And there's several ways to deal with it. One is, I have good friendships. My wife and I, we get a chance to talk. Obviously, she doesn't know names. I can tell her situations, as long as it's not going to reveal the identity of anyone. Um, I also realize like, hey, a lot of the burdens that people carry, man, it's not really my burden. I'm there to listen and to care for them, but that's a battle that they're fighting, and I'm here to kind of be with them through it as long as whatever they'll allow me to do, as much leeway they'll give me or opportunity to kind of lean into it, I'll do. But I always have to differentiate and just realize, hey, this is your battle. I'm here to help as much as I can, um, and I want to care as much as I can. But that's kind of where it ends for me.
Right.
Um, Obviously my faith is a big part of trying to manage the stress and the burden. It's just trying to find hope in the midst of that and really help people see hope in the midst of whatever they're going through. um and then just taking care of myself, working out, eating the right foods, trying to get sleep, uh spending time with my family. Those are kind of things that I utilize to kind of take care of myself and help manage the emotional burden that comes with my job.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And how do you comfort people that aren't Christians, that don't believe in God? How are you able to do that as a chaplain?
Um, really, you'd have to ask them. And really, you were one of the guys
Yeah.
I talked. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even know when we met. Were you a
Yeah.
Christian back then? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think there's something powerful about presence. There's something about powerful about helping someone know that, hey, regardless of where you stand in your faith or non-faith, that I'm with you, man. I'm going to be in this foxhole with you. You may not know me, but I'm going to stand by your side as long as you allow me to.
Hmm.
And obviously, I try to respect people's space, but I think there's something powerful in being present with people and helping them see and know that they're not alone. And so I think that's the biggest thing I try to offer is, I'm here to listen, actively listen, care, show empathy, help them understand or help them kind of navigate through, hey, what are your resources? What do you typically lean on? Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be someone's their only source of dealing with their own grief.
Right.
So I'm trying to help them, give them tools or utilize the tools that they already have, to navigate whatever the grief they're going through. And so I'm
Hmm.
asking, hey, when you've been in a tough spot before, who have you talked to? What has gotten you through? Because you've lived life. They made
Right.
it through they made it
Hmm.
through the traumas that come with just living on this earth and what's gotten them through. And so they start thinking through, oh man, normally I talk to my mom or I talk to my girlfriend or whatever, or, whatever it might be, but maybe that's run out, so maybe that relationship is no longer there. Okay, well, who are some other friends that you can lean into?
Hmm.
Are you, you know, what do you normally do to kind of relieve stress? Oh, well, I work out or I play video games. Okay, do those things really help? How have they helped? And so I'm just kind of getting them thinking through some of the ways in which they cope. Ultimately, obviously my views are, man, I think there's some things that can help and that some therapists will tell you that you should do that I 100% agree with. But personally, I believe that, in order to feel real joy and real peace, it only comes from Jesus. I think you can have a level of like, I'm content with where I am, but I think true contentment and true peace and true rest really comes from knowing who Jesus is and knowing that there's going to be an ultimate rest one day. And so, but yeah, I think the main thing is just being present with people, being engaged, helping them know that they're not alone, trying to connect them with resources that I think can help manage the stress. So,
I appreciate that. And so, how long does it take you to really get good at that and good at comforting people? Because I know when I had talked with you in Turkey, I'm not going to share the details about it, but man, just talking to you, it made me feel so much better about the situation. You just gave me truth. So, yeah. So how long does that take to really get good at?
man, Daniel, I don't be honest with you, I don't even know if I'm good at it. One of those things, it's one of those things where you just trust that God is going to use you even if you're broken, because you never know what's going to walk into your office or who you're going to run into and what kind of information they're going to drop on your lap.
Right.
And it can be like while you're passing by someone, next thing you know, they're just dropping their whole, like, all of their burdens on you in the hallway or on a football field, on a basketball court, or in a gym. And so I don't know if I'm good at it, but I just trust that God would allow me to care for people. And I think maybe that's it, is just truly caring, just
Mhm.
saying, hey, like, I don't care where you are, what you believe in, what you're going through, man, I care for you as a human being.
Mm.
Um, and starting there. And then also knowing that, hey, my goal is not to solve your problems. My goal is just to let you know that, man, I'm here to listen. And there's no
Mm.
judgment on my part. I don't care what you've done. I've had a lot of men confess that they've had adultery, they've done some really wicked things, and I'm like, hey man, I'm no judge, man. And I've done some sinful things myself and things I'm ashamed of. But there's a hope that goes beyond our circumstances. And so I think having personally dealt with my own grief and my own shame and my own guilt, and I wouldn't say dealt with it in the past tense, but I still continue to deal with those things, right? But I run to the one hope that I know that gives me peace, and I think that allows me to communicate with people in a way where um, I don't have an anxious presence. I can be present and I can be engaged. And so, but I'm always growing, man. There probably, for every good conversation that I've had where I feel like I was helpful, probably had 10 bad ones where I was like, what did I just tell this person? Like, what did I just say?
Mm.
Or I was not helpful, there's just some things you just can't connect with. So,
What would you say is the most challenging part about being a chaplain?
um, I mean, I think the confidentiality piece is a real big part, and a lot depends on the kind of ministry you're in. So right now I'm at a unit where we have about 350 people. And
Mhm.
so if only 10% of people came to me, that's a pretty significant amount. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, being at a one deep spot, because I'm the only chaplain in my unit. And so just knowing the challenges that people are going through, but knowing that they're masking it through, overperforming at work, or alcohol, abuse of whatever it might be you can think of, knowing their hidden and their secret sins, so to speak, that they carry, but masked with so many different things, and not really being able to do a whole lot about it. And so I think that can be some of the challenging stuff. It's just grieving with them, and sometimes it's just, hey, you just need to know this about me, but I'm not going to do anything about it. you know.
Right.
So that's kind of where the heartache comes in, is you just know people are struggling, um, and maybe they let you in a little bit, but no, they're not necessarily doing what they need to do to kind of get through it. they're just surviving, so to speak. And so I think that can be some of the challenging part, because you only, my job, you don't really want to push too much. You want to be able to invite people into a conversation and invite people to do things that'll help them navigate through life in a healthier way. But you can't make them do it. They
Mhm.
have to want to do it on their own. And so knowing that about certain people and seeing them on the daily can be challenging for me.
Appreciate you sharing that. And what would you say would be the most common thing that military members go through, and how can they use, their faith to help them battle it?
I mean, when you say common things that military members go through, I mean, everyone PCSs, right? For the most
Mhm.
part, everyone's going to PCS, or people are going to leave their loved ones, leave home, move to a new city, and that takes a big toll on people. Transitioning to a new place, whether they're going solo or they're bringing their family with them. That's something that everyone deals with in the military, and so depending on where you're going, that can be a challenge. But in terms of how can they use their faith, is that kind of your question, or?
Right. Right. How, as a Christian, how can you kind of deal with that?
I mean, I think it's leaning in, man, leaning into your faith. I was thinking about this the other day. You have a lot of military members that are smart, man. I mean, the military, if you're in the military, you're known for planning, right?
Mhm.
Everything is planned, right? You know when you're going to have your meeting. We're planning for the next war. You know what I mean? We're planning
Mhm.
for 2028, 2030, what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And so if that's how we operate in the business that we're in, we kind of have to think that way in regards to faith.
Mhm.
And so if more members would lean in to just saying, Lord, give me a vision for my family.
Mhm.
What kind of family, what kind of woman do I want to marry?
Mhm.
Um, how do I want to raise my kids? What do I want my kids to know and understand and believe before they leave my household? And what do I need to do to be ready? What are some things I need to be doing to, we talk about physical readiness or just readiness in general, but what does readiness look like for the Christian? Where
Mhm.
there's things that we have to do to be ready, but just to stay ready. I got a buddy of mine says, "Man, I don't get ready because I am ready. I stay ready."
Mhm.
You know, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And so, I think the daily investment in your spiritual life, reading a book, reading the Bible, having discipleship and faith, relationships that are kind of rooted in your faith. That means being a part of a local church, means not just attending, but participating in worship with a church, like actually being engaged, not just going, but like being engaged in the life of a church is important. Um, again, I mentioned reading books about your faith. Um, having a group or band of brothers or sisters that you can kind of connect with on a regular and talk about life. I think those are things that we as Christians need to invest in, and lean into. But also, taking care of your body, man. When you take care of your body physically, you take care of your mind, and I think you take care of yourself spiritually. And so that's kind of a real big passion of mine is, man, we really need to lean into all of those areas. And I don't mean that as like a task list, like this is how you become a super Christian, because that's not what it's about. But if the question is, how do you take care of yourself? How do you manage that? Man, you got to get engaged, man. You got to do these things because life is war. We're,
Right.
we're preparing for a global war, you know, but man, there's a spiritual warfare that's going on. And if we're not doing the things that we need to do to be ready now, it's going to be hard to get ready when that time comes.
Mhm.
But really, as a Christian, we're always under attack, man. The enemy's always working. And one of the best ways he works at us is try to get us complacent, get us comfortable.
Mhm.
Oh man, you don't have to read that book. Oh man, don't be so legalistic. And and think about it, those whispers are true, right? Some of those things are
Yeah.
true. And that's what makes it so challenging. It's like, well, I don't want to be legalistic about it, or but it's
Mhm.
like, it's not about being legalistic, but it's being disciplined with your faith in your life, and doing the things that you may not always feel like doing, but doing it anyway because God is commanding you to do it, you know? And so it means raising your family in that way. And people always want to say, well, as a faith, my Christian faith, I don't want to force anything. It's like, no, man, like me and my family, we're gonna pray together. And guess what? 95% of the time, we don't feel like praying. We're always running in different directions, but we're memorizing scripture together because this is what God's called us to do: is hide His word in our hearts. So we are going to memorize scripture together, and we're going to try to have meals together. We're going to try to talk and engage together every night. I want to have a conversation. How are you doing? What's going on? How are you feeling? What'd you think about the sermon today? Or what are you reading? What kind of books are my kids reading? What are we reading to them? What are we exposing them to? Who are their friends? And also doing that with my wife. It's making sure that we're staying, united in our faith, but we're staying engaged, So those are kind of things I feel like those are the ways in which we can walk with Jesus and take care of our faith, so to speak, or allow our faith to take care of us in the military.
Man, that's such an encouragement, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's really good. So I think we want to shift gears just a little bit, talk about your time as a chaplain when you were attached to Special Forces a little bit. So what was that like?
Well, I was attached to, first of all, I was stationed at Cannon Air Force Base, and I was attached to the wing, so I wasn't attached to necessarily a special operations unit, so to speak. And in the Air Force, I don't want to downplay it, but I was attached to the 27th Special Operations Wing, 27 South, and so primarily my job there was to work at a chapel, and is to basically be a parish chaplain. That's really what you are as an Air Force chaplain. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to switch over to the Navy, because it's just more embedded ministry is kind of what they call it, more engaged ministry. But I was able to deploy and deployed to Qatar, which was our home base, and then also to Iraq. And so whatever questions you have about that, I'm more than willing to answer.
Yeah. So for when you were over in Iraq, you were part of the Al-Assad air attack. Can you just kind of walk us through that and how you played a part in that?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure who all the players were, but I know that when I was in Al-Assad in 2021, they had some, I don't know what you want to call it, but they would launch rocket attacks to our base, and it was frequent enough to where they would do it all the time, but rarely did they ever hit,
Mm-hmm.
And something would come over the loudspeaker or take cover or whatever it might be. I forget what the wording would be. But there's one particular time, which I wasn't in Iraq at the time. I was in Qatar as our home base, and they hit the building that a lot of our folks were staying in. And I remember my boss, it was like, I think it was July 5th or 6th. So almost a year. What is today? The 6th? Oh man, today's the 6th. Actually, it's the anniversary of that. So yeah, I remember my boss, my 06, saying, hey, there's a good chance we're going to send you to Iraq, to Al-Assad, because they just got hit. And so I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, man, I'm ready. Just let me know what I got to do. And so in the meantime, I started kind of feeling with some of my buddies. There's a safety guy, and there's a shirt, and there's another captain at the time. All of his stuff was in Iraq. And so I remember just saying, okay, I wonder if any of these guys can go with me, So I just started asking, hey, they're thinking about sending me to Iraq. Would any of y'all be willing to go? And so the safety guy was like, he goes, chap, listen, I got a wife and kid, man. I'm not going to Iraq. I'm not going to Iraq because I want to be with you. He goes, I'm actually not going to go. Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to Iraq. I was like, bro, you going to let me go to Iraq all by myself? And he's like, yeah. He's like, they're not asking for me. They're asking for you.
Right.
And so I kind of gave him a guilt trip, and he felt like dirt after that, But I understand you because it was kind of a
Yeah.
sticky time. And he's like, I'm not going there just to, I can't really do anything with my job. I'd only be going there for you. And the reality is he wasn't willing to go there just for me. And so I understand, understood. And then the first shirt, I was like, "Hey, are you going to be able to go?" And she was like, "Man, I talked to the colonel, and he says he's not going to send me. It's too dangerous."
Mhm.
And so I was like, "Okay." And then my buddy, who's in the army, because it was a joint command. He had all his stuff in Iraq, and he wanted to go because all his guys were there.
Mhm.
And so I remember him telling me, he goes, "Hey, man, I talked to the colonel. They will not let me go. It's too dangerous."
Wow.
And so he goes, "But all my stuff is there." I told the colonel, like, "I got to get all my stuff." And I was like, "Bro, they're not going to let you go?" They're like, "No, man." I said, "Well, dude, like, why are they sending me?" You know?
Right.
I was like, "You got chaplains on that base right now, you
Right.
know?" And I remember asking that question. I don't know if I asked it out loud, but I remember wondering, like, "Hey, why are they sending me?" And
Right.
so remember it was like 2 a.m. or between 12 and 2. I was sitting in this room just waiting to get on a plane. I was gonna get on the plane by myself. It was C-130. So here I am getting on this huge C-130 just by myself, the only dude on the
Wow.
plane in the middle of the night. Because special operations, you only operate in the middle of the night.
Right.
I remember seeing my backpack, and I remember I was like literally scared, man. I took a picture of my backpack, and I told my buddies. I told two of my buddies. I said, "Hey, listen, man. I said I don't know if I'm overreacting. I don't really know what's going on, but I'm going into a sticky situation. Um, and if for some reason something happens, I want you guys to do my funeral." I said,
Hmm.
not trying to be over dramatic, but this is kind of where we are right now. And kind of what led me to believe that was the fact that, well, one is our building did get hit, and we had some people that were injured in that attack. The fact that they weren't willing to send any other members to Iraq with me, it told me about the nature of the situation. I was like, they're not going to even let the first sergeant go. Think about that. They don't let
Mhm.
the first sergeant go. They're going to send the chaplain.
Right.
They're not going to let the army guy. He has all his stuff there, and I was like, and then they're sending me by myself, and they didn't want to send them because they said it's too high risk. And so that's kind of got me thinking. I was like, at one end, I was like, am I just expendable? Maybe, maybe they don't care if
Yeah.
that did run through my mind, but I think also it was a by name request. I had several people that are saying, "Hey, man, we want our chaplain to come. Like, we know that
Mhm.
there's a chaplain here," but I'd spent a lot of time with those guys
Mhm.
at the time, and so I think there was a by name request, like, "Hey, we want our chaplain. We don't
Mhm.
want the base chaplain who doesn't know us. We want our chaplain." And so, went there, man. Got to Iraq in the middle of the night. No one was there to pick me up. Had to figure out how to get to where I needed to be.
Mhm.
And then, at the end of the day, you don't know really what you're doing. You don't know what you're walking into. All you get is the word that, "Hey, you're going to Iraq. They got hit. They need some people that need your support."
Mhm.
But I get there, and you just say, "Okay, Lord, use me as you will."
Mhm.
So you walk in there and you just start engaging and put your stuff down. And, I'm not like rushing in. Who wants to talk? You're not really doing that. You're just kind of cool, calm, collect, and just naturally build relationships, or, reconnect with people and just say, "Hey, man, help me understand what's going on. Like, how are you guys doing?" Just walking around. And so, um, through that time, you're just talking to people here and there. There were some people that were really, really scared, and there were some people that were scared but not showing it. And there's
Mhm.
some people that you can tell they're visibly shaken by the whole thing. And
Mhm.
I remember my religious affairs guy at the time, great guy, and he just said, "Hey, man," he goes, like, he straight up told me, he's like, "Yo, like, I need to know Jesus, man." Like, like he told me, he's like,
Right.
"You know how to get right with God, man, because I don't know if I'm going to
Right.
survive this appointment." And a part of
Right.
me just was cracking up, but I mean, it just go to show you the reality of, like, it was pretty serious.
Mm.
So anyway, had some conversations with some guys, some good meaningful time. And as soon as I realized, hey, I think I'm done, I accompanied some people to the hospital for them to get checked out and all
Mm.
that kind of stuff. And then as soon as I realized, hey, man, I think I'm good to go, I just bounced out, you know, called the folks, said, "Hey, I'm ready to get picked up." And they sent a plane to pick me up and was out of there. So I think I stayed probably for a few days, maybe 3 or 4 days,
Mm-hmm.
and bounced out. So
And so, what was your message to them? Were you just being present, or what was the message you were trying to send them?
My message was, yeah, just to be present, man. And I remember I had a pilot friend of mine, and he just said, "Hey, Chap, man, as soon as you got here, there's just a sense of peace we had.
Mm,
I don't really know, but I can't really describe it." But he says, "Yeah, as soon as we saw you, we just knew we were gonna be good."
mm,
And so, I mean, that's what he said. He was a pilot,
mm.
and I was like, I appreciate that.
Wow, that's got to be
But
really
really, actually,
rewarding.
yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, you don't really know what you're doing. You're just trying to be useful. You know what I
Mm,
mean? As a chaplain, a lot of times you're like, dude, don't let me screw it up, but let me be useful.
mm,
And you have to navigate through those spaces because some people know you, some people don't. Some people, because they see the cross, they see what you stand for, they want nothing to do with you, and so you just kind of have to navigate through that in a wise and a winsome way. And so I really didn't know what I was doing other than, Lord, I'm going to be available and I want to listen and care where I can. And there's nothing I can physically do to change anything. Like, I'm only going to take people off, off Iraq and send them back home. Well, that's not my job. Um, but I can listen, I can care for people and help them kind of navigate and talk through some of their fears. And then, depending on their faith, it's point them to the one who ultimately holds all things in his hands. So that was my goal, is just be there for folks. I mean, I was like literally just driving people to the hospital part. I forget they call it roll, what they call it, but it was like a little army hospital set up, and I just sit there with them, and they would talk about their experience, what's happening, and how they're feeling, and that's really all I did. I just felt like I was trying to be useful. So
awesome. And so, you made the transition into the Navy. When did that happen?
happened in 2023.
2023. And how is it different being with the Navy?
Um, right now it's been awesome, man. Probably one of the best decisions I ever made. Obviously marrying my wife and having kids, all those kind of things. But career wise, I love it. And I would say I love it more so ministry wise. Career wise, it was kind of a step back, because it holds my promotion back by a few years.
Mhm.
But the ministry is different, man. In the Air Force, as an Air Force chaplain, you are primarily attached to a chapel, meaning like a parish-based ministry. You operate out of the chapel. It's almost expected that people go to you. You're not really in the units as much, and you could probably speak for that, as
Mhm.
being in the Air Force is like, how often do you see your chaplain in your unit? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Depending on your chaplain, you may see him or her quite a bit, but it's not really the norm, because they typically operate out of the chapel, and there's so many other duties that they have, responsibilities that they have. Whereas in the Navy, you're primarily embedded in the units, and so you're not working for another chaplain; you're working for a commander of a unit. And so, so far, it's been awesome,
Mhm.
because one of the things we love to do is be with people, and I'm an introvert too, right? But I love being engaged with people, and not having to fight through administrative tasks just to get out and be with people. Like, that's my primary job, is just be with your people.
Mhm.
And so so far it's been good. And then obviously the Navy, you have better locations, you have a lot more
Yeah.
diversity. So you're always gonna be by the ocean for the most part. Right now I'm assigned to a Coast Guard unit, so I'm here in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
Um, but you also have the opportunity to serve with the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Coast Guard. And so far it's been a great transition. This is probably my best assignment so far.
Mm. That's really good to hear. So, looking back, what would you say would be your most memorable moment from being a chaplain?
Man, building some great memories here. There are a lot of good moments, man. I mean, my first unit, I was assigned to the first fighter wing in at Langley Air Force Base, and I had just great ministry there. I had great ministry there, great connections with our command. great opportunities. Obviously Turkey was interesting. That's where we met. I felt like that was also an incredible assignment. There's just something. You were there, man. God was doing
Yeah.
something special in Turkey where you're away from home. It's a remote assignment. You couldn't bring your family with you. You couldn't leave the base, and it kind of forced us to really get to know each other and to really lean on one another. And because you don't have the option to go to church off base or anything like that, there's only one worship service you can go to, and that was the base chapel. And so I think that kind of allowed our ministry to be really rich because they didn't have very many choices. They can just not go or they can go.
Right.
And if you had some sort of need, people were going to go. So they were going to go to the chapel. And so that was a very good experience overall. And then Canyon Air Force Base, that was probably my worst assignment. I won't go into all the details there, but my experience, I would say my experience there, but also coupled with some experiences I had from Turkey, kind of helped me see like, hey, I need to redirect and go somewhere else. And so that's kind of how the Navy came in. But in terms of one experience, I can't really put it down in one. I've had great experiences at all my bases, all my assignments, but so far this would probably be the best one so far. Is ministry with the Coast Guard has been awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. So just in closing, why should someone follow Jesus?
Man, that's kind of a loaded question. Why not, right? No, there are a lot of reasons why I can think why people wouldn't. There's a ton of questions that people have about faith. And they're legitimate questions, that people have and honest questions. And they want to know, like, is he worth following? Is he real? And how can I follow him when all of these things around me are happening? And so there's some legitimate questions that people have, and I want to honor those questions. And I think God is open to those questions, and he's open to walking people hand in hand through and navigating through those questions that they have. And so, but why should people follow Jesus? I think because he's worthy. I believe he created us. I believe that he is God. I believe that he's sovereign. But more than anything is I believe that he is good. Like if I didn't think we serve a good Father, a God that has our best in mind, even when life doesn't seem to be going all that well. And if I didn't think he's worthy of trusting because he has my ultimate good in mind and his glory in mind, then yeah, I wouldn't follow. But I believe he does. And so to me, that's the reason why, because he's a good Father. So
I appreciate that. I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. You have definitely had a big impact on my life. Like I said, in Turkey, and I know we've stayed connected over the years. So just thank you for what you're doing, in your ministry and in the Navy. And like I said, I thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you, man. And I want to. You were to that pivotal moment too, man. When I met you, you're going through a really, really tough time, and you had to answer the question, why should I follow Jesus? And I know that you're interviewing me, but I want to ask you that question. What made you? Because you were in a very, very tough spot at that time when I met you, and you had to make decisions every day to follow him.
I think for me, it was just mainly, I got to a place where it was all that I could do. The situation was just so bad. And when I finally just decided to surrender and say, hey, Lord, I need you to be a part of my life. Like, I can't fix this mess. And it was a night at the Chaplain, and I was there, and we were just doing a worship service with just a couple of buddies. And as I just start to sing and I just, start to talk to the Lord, he just, began to just help me through that. And that was when it started to go in the right direction, and I tell people all the time too, when you give your life to God or you resurrender your life if you've fallen away, he's there to pick you up immediately. And it's not automatic, like, hey, my life is completely better, but he is there to walk alongside you throughout the whole time. And it wasn't an easy easy road, but now where I'm at now, it's just I can't believe how good he is.
Amen. Hey, well, thank you, man. Thank you for following Jesus and really surrendering, man. I mean, that was the the ticket is that, man. I mean, you had to take the steps because there were so many other options. You could have went out every night and hung out with the boys and did all the stuff that you knew wasn't going to be satisfying, but you made the decision to hang out with some guys who were worshiping on a Friday night and going to church on Sundays and playing games, and it was just a different kind of fun, but you made that decision.
Yeah, and I think that there's actually something that you had written in a paper, and then I think I'll actually share because I think it's very fitting to what we're talking about right now. You said, "I feel like I've caught a glimpse of the beauty of the cross, that God would take something so painful, His beloved cross, and turn it into something beautiful, that the darkness of the cross would be used to bring men into the light." And that's something, as kind of thinking about how we were going to do the podcast, that was something that really just really helped me, that you had written. So I appreciate that as well.
No, I appreciate that, man. And God's in the business of doing that, and I think that's what keeps me going every day. Is I listen to these hard stories. I know that God can turn it around, and He can use, that brokenness and turn it into something beautiful. And He's done it not just once, but He's going to continue to do that in our lives, time and time again. He'll take a very difficult, heartbreaking situation and make it beautiful somehow.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, I appreciate it, and I wish the best for you and your family.
Thank you, man. Likewise. Let's stay in touch, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of Faith in the Line of Duty. If you're a first responder or in the military and have a story you'd like to share, email me at faithinthelineofduty@gmail.com. You could be a guest on a future episode. To continue the conversation, visit my Facebook and Instagram page. Thanks again for tuning in, and join me next time for another encouraging story of faith in the line of duty.